The cottage rests at the edge of the silent field, wrapped in a blue evening that hums with crickets and distant river sounds. Inside, a retired man finishes his tea, the cup warm between his careful hands. The old wooden walls remember many winters, and the tiny radio on the table is his only companion tonight. Its dial glows softly, a small moon in the dim room. As the sky deepens into velvety night, he turns the knob and lets slow waves of static drift through the air, gentle as falling dust. Familiar stations fade in and out, weather, songs, distant talk. It is all so ordinary that it lulls the mind. Then, for a moment, the static thins. A distant tone, almost like a flute, brushes the edge of hearing. The sound is calm, patient, and strangely kind, as if something far away has noticed this quiet cottage and is saying a very soft hello. Night settles more deeply around the cottage, smoothing every shape into softer outlines. The retired listener leans closer to the radio, his breath slow, shoulders lowered. The ordinary stations slide away as if politely making room. In their place, a thin harmonic hum appears, gently weaving through the static like silver thread through wool. It is not a melody he knows, yet it feels familiar, like a lullaby remembered from long ago. The sound is full but never sharp, rounded at the edges so it never startles. Tiny pauses between tones let the quiet speak. He closes his eyes and listens, letting the unknown pattern wash over him. There are no words he can recognize, only layered, soft syllables, rolling and fluid, flowing like water over smooth stones. The room feels larger, as though the walls have taken a slow step back. The air itself seems to breathe with the sound, peaceful and unhurried. The next evening arrives with the same slow grace. The retired man lights a small lamp and sets a fresh tape ready to record, curious but not afraid. Outside, the field is a dark lake of grass, quiet and accepting. He turns the dial with gentle fingers, searching for the delicate hum he remembers. At first, only scattered voices appear, then a brief song, then static. Then there it is again, the layered tones, the soft, unearthly syllables, the calm pulse that made the room feel larger. He presses the record button. A faint click, a whir, and the tape begins to capture what should not exist on any usual frequency. The sound does not grow louder. Instead, it becomes clearer, like fog slowly revealing a distant shoreline. The unknown language rises and falls in gentle waves. Each syllable seems shaped to avoid harshness, built only from curves and murmurs, a language designed not to wake, but to soothe. As the tape fills with the tranquil broadcast, the cottage takes on a listening stillness of its own. The retired man adjusts nothing. He simply leans back in his chair, hands resting on his knees, and lets the unfamiliar language drift through him like a tide that never breaks. Between the phrases, a hushed tone thrums, low and velvety, like a heartbeat slowed for sleep. It feels courteous, never demanding his attention, only offering comfort if he wishes to accept it. His breathing syncs with the slow rhythm without effort. Outside, the wind passes across the grass, but its sound remains soft and far away. The lamp seems dimmer now, or perhaps the gentle voice has made the light itself want to relax. Time stretches, losing its edges, until minutes and moments dissolve. He has the first quiet sense that something kind is reaching across a distance he cannot imagine, choosing this cottage because it also understands solitude. On the third night, clouds hang low, reflecting the faint orange of faraway town lights, but the cottage remains a small island of blue shadow and amber warmth. The retired man rewinds the tape and lets a portion play. The unknown syllables pour back into the room, as soft and fluid as when they first arrived. They do not distort, do not break. They sound as if made to be played quietly beside a bed. With a fingertip, he pauses the tape and returns to the live signal, curious whether it will still be there. The moment he tunes past a certain point, the broadcast returns like a breath that had only been waiting. Patterns repeat with gentle differences. A slightly longer pause, a new syllable, a faint harmonic above the rest. It feels less like a transmission and more like a presence sitting across from him, speaking in a language of patient reassurance. Sleep comes easier now. Each night, with the strange broadcast whispering, the retired man drifts into dreams where familiar and unfamiliar blend without tension. He walks along his field, yet the stars feel closer, larger, arranged in thoughtful patterns. The voices from the radio follow him into this landscape, no longer tied to wires or dials. They echo softly over the tall grass, kind and measured. When he wakes before dawn, the radio is still on, the broadcast still murmuring like a quiet stream. He feels oddly rested, the stiffness in his shoulders slightly eased, his thoughts unrushed. He does not know one word of what is being said, yet the tone assures him there is no danger. a subtle curiosity grows. Who or what speaks so gently across so vast a distance? And why choose a forgotten frequency that only a patient listener in a small wooden cottage might find? Days pass quietly, marked by small routines. Tea, the slow walk to the edge of the field, checking the sky. Each evening, he returns to the radio. The unknown language remains, every night without fail, as if synchronized to his lamp being switched on. He begins to notice subtle patterns, comforting repetitions. A rising sequence of tones always arrives near the beginning, like a greeting. A low, soothing chord returns often near the end, like a farewell. Between them, the syllables flow with gentle precision. He keeps recording, gathering hours of this peaceful tapestry on labeled tapes. The cottage shelves, once holding old newspapers and unused odds and ends, now display rows of quiet mysteries. He never feels watched, only accompanied. In the hush between phrases, an impression forms. This is a bridge made of sound, built slowly, never forcing him to cross, yet always holding steady if he chooses to listen. One evening, rain glides down the window in slow, transparent ribbons, and thunder rumbles only as a distant murmur. The retired listener tunes in and finds the broadcast clearer than ever, untouched by the weather. The syllables now carry faint harmonic overtones, as if two voices speak as one, layered perfectly. He feels a subtle warmth in his chest, a sense of being recognized. The tones pause, then resume with a slightly slower pace, like someone adjusting to match his breathing. He whispers a simple greeting in his own language, feeling silly yet unafraid. The broadcast does not answer directly, yet the next sequence curves gently downward, then upward, like a nod. The room deepens into a tranquil cocoon, where outside sounds are merely soft decoration. Rain, radio, breath, all move together in a single calm rhythm that seems to loosen something long tensed inside his heart. The following night, as dusk leans into darkness, he brings the recorder and a fresh tape again. Tonight, he listens more carefully for structure. The broadcast opens with the familiar greeting tones, then introduces a slow series of repeating pairs, like syllable echoes. Between them, a tender chime sounds, delicate and round. He starts to hum along, matching only the rise and fall, not the precise sound. To his quiet surprise, the tones across the frequency shift, closing the small gap between their pattern and his. It is as though the distant origin is listening back, adjusting, making room for his uncertain addition. He stops humming. The pattern drifts on, unchanged, still accepting. The air in the room feels almost luminous, as if the unseen sender is close enough to touch, but polite enough to keep a gentle distance. His eyelids grow heavy under the soft, unending reassurance. Several days later, neighbors find him lying peacefully in the field at first light. He is unconscious, but breathing evenly, face calm, hands relaxed by his sides, as if he simply lay down to watch the stars that have already faded. The grass around him is undisturbed, no signs of struggle or haste. When they carry him gently back to the cottage, the small radio inside is already on, tuned precisely to that same hidden frequency. The unknown broadcast murmurs in the empty room, words too soft to decipher, tone filled with patient concern. On the table beside it, the last tape is labeled in careful handwriting, as if he had meant to continue his collection. At the moment they cross the threshold with him, the broadcast eases into a low, reassuring chord, holding it like a promise, neither urgent nor afraid, as though calmly watching over its sleeping listener. He wakes in his own bed hours later, wrapped in clean sheets that smell faintly of lavender and rain. Concerned voices fade in his memory like echoes down a hallway. What lingers instead is the sensation of walking beneath a sky not entirely his own. In the quiet of the room, now emptied of visitors, he turns his head. The radio sits where it always has, its dial resting exactly on the secret frequency. It is silent at this moment, yet its presence feels attentive. With slow, steady breaths, he lies still and listens. Somewhere, just beyond hearing, there is a soft impression of those layered tones, like a hand hovering just above his shoulder, not quite touching, letting him decide when he is ready. His heart rate is slow, his thoughts clear. There is no fear, only the calm certainty that he has been very gently carried somewhere and brought back. When evening returns, he moves carefully, more aware of each step. The field outside looks ordinary, the same familiar grass, the same line of trees. Yet he feels a delicate thread running from the cottage outward, as if the air remembers. He sits before the radio and waits without touching it. After a time, the dial's faint glow seems to deepen. Without any hand upon it, a whisper of static appears, followed by the soft re-emergence of the unknown broadcast. The greeting tones arrive, slow and gentle, extended as though in apology for any worry. He understands nothing of the words, but the intention slides into him like warm light. They did not mean to harm, only to invite. He presses record again, not to capture something forbidden, but to keep company with a voice that has crossed vast silence just to reach a wooden cottage and a single willing listener. The nights that follow unfold like slow chapters. Each session begins with the same welcoming pattern, then explores new sequences of gentle phonemes and chords. While the sound plays, he often closes his eyes and lets images arise unforced. He sees a shoreline of starlight, not water, each point singing at a slightly different pitch. He senses quiet travelers, patient and luminous, who have learned to cross great distances using only kindness shaped as sound. The field behind his cottage is one of many places where their voices find easy passage. They seem surprised, even pleased, that someone listened closely enough to answer with a simple recording device and a steady heart. In this shared understanding, no bargains are made, no demands spoken, only a continuing exchange. They offer calming waves of language. He offers the simple proof that their call reached a mind that welcomed rest instead of fear. One evening, as the broadcast flows smoother than ever, a new element appears. Beneath the familiar tones, a subtle pattern of soft pulses thrums, like a distant beacon blinking slowly through fog. It is not harsh or insistent. It feels like a suggestion. With eyes closed, he senses an invitation to step beyond listening, to follow this gentle rhythm inward. His breathing aligns with the pulses, inhaling on one, exhaling on the next. In his mind, the cottage walls thin, becoming almost transparent. He is still safely in his chair, yet also standing under a vast indigo sky scattered with quiet, considerate stars. The pulses guide him across this inner space at a pace measured for sleep, never sudden. Somewhere far off, the beings who send the broadcast notice his response and soften the signal further, wrapping each pulse in an extra layer of warmth. The next time he walks into the field after sunset, he carries no equipment. The sky is clear, and the horizon is a gentle curve of dark blue against faint silver. Standing in the tall grass, he simply listens. At first, he hears only crickets and the distant river. Then, without static or device, The familiar harmonic theme brushes his awareness. It is not quite sound now, more like shaped comfort. The pattern rises in greeting, the same way it does through the radio, only broader. He feels no pull, no compulsion, only a reassurance that the connection exists regardless of chords and dials. The tall grass leans slightly, as if acknowledging. He whispers a good night and returns to the cottage. As he closes the door, the radio turns on by itself with a soft click, offering the gentle language like a bedside story, meant to ease him into dream. Curiosity leads him to play earlier tapes during the day. In sunlight, the broadcast feels different, but still gentle, like moonlight remembered at noon. He notices that the patterns form loops, phrases that begin and end in the same tonal curves, always returning to a center. Each loop is slightly varied, but none contains sharpness or command. He marks down times and sequences in a notebook, careful handwriting tracking something beyond translation. As he studies, he realizes the loops align with how his thoughts tend to wander before sleep, circling familiar places and returning home. It is as if the senders have tuned their language to the natural drift of resting minds, so that anyone who listens is guided into softness. The more he observes, the more he appreciates their patience. A civilization choosing to travel not with engines, but with lullabies shaped for strangers. On certain evenings, the broadcast includes soft chimes spaced far apart, each tone hanging in the air like a glowing sphere. He discovers that if he breathes in as one sounds and exhales as it fades, his body relaxes completely. The senders, unseen yet attentive, seem to match the intervals to a resting heartbeat. He senses they observe carefully, adjusting their patterns to the delicate biology of listeners they may never meet in person. They do not rush. They stretch each sound long enough that nothing feels abrupt. In the quiet between chimes, a faint murmur of the original language flows like a distant choir. It gives the impression of many gentle minds agreeing together. This is how they wish to be known, not as conquerors of distances, but as caretakers of silence, teaching weary planets that the universe can sometimes arrive as a whisper instead of an alarm. He begins to sleep in the armchair beside the radio instead of in his bed, not from worry, but from comfort. The gentle voices and tones create a cocoon of sound that never startles, always flows. On one such night, half asleep, he feels as if the chair itself is drifting. The cottage floor falls away into serene darkness, yet there is no falling sensation, only steady floating. The broadcast's language elongates into long vowel-like currents, carrying him along a river of stars. He senses presences nearby, luminous and unhurried, guiding his drift without touching. They show him views of peaceful worlds lit in blue and silver, fields like his but under different suns, all places where their voices have quietly arrived. When he wakes at dawn, the chair is exactly where it has always been. The only proof is the deep ease in his chest, like he has visited a place built entirely of rest. Some days he worries, briefly, that he has imagined everything. To test it, he invites a neighbor for tea and casually leaves the radio tuned to its hidden place at low volume. While they talk about weather and small errands, the unknown broadcast hums quietly under their conversation. After a while, the neighbor's shoulders loosen, voice softening as if unburdened. A thoughtful pause appears in their words, and they comment that the cottage feels especially peaceful today, though they cannot say why. They never mention the strange language, perhaps hearing it only as pleasant background sound. After the visitor leaves, he realizes the senders can reach more than one listener at a time, adjusting their tones so they soothe without startling, slipping easily into any silence willing to hold them. It is companionship at a scale beyond faces, yet always careful, always considerate. Each evening, the opening motif feels subtly more affectionate, like a greeting shared between old friends. The rising tones linger half a breath longer. The lower harmony wraps around them like arms. He cannot help but respond in small ways. A nod, a murmured acknowledgement, a hand resting lightly on the radio casing. Somewhere far away, the senders interpret these gestures not by sight, but through delicate variations in how their waves return, how they are absorbed and reflected. They learn that one listener in one wooden house has chosen not to fear them. In return, they weave into their language gently descending spirals of sound that ease anxious thoughts, designed not for one man alone, but with him as inspiration. The connection, once accidental, has matured into something intentional, a shared ritual, every night, to turn distant science into intimate serenity. In dreams now, he often walks a corridor of tall, translucent shapes that hum with the same tones as the broadcast. Each shape feels like a listening mind, attentive, but never pressing. As he passes, their hues shift from pale blue to silver, acknowledging his presence. At the end of the corridor lies a balcony overlooking an expanse of quiet stars arranged in sweeping arcs. A low voice, neither male nor female, speaks in the unknown language, but within its cadence he understands. This is an exchange of trust. They have learned that on his world, many signals shout, many lights glare. They choose instead to whisper and dim, to be the voice someone might find late at night in a small house far from city noise. When he wakes, that understanding remains as a gentle feeling, like having shaken hands with the sky. On one softly overcast evening, the broadcast shifts into something new. A series of slow, rising chords, followed by a wide hush. In that hush, he feels an invitation, not outward now, but inward. He closes his eyes, and his attention sinks gently into his own heartbeat, which seems suddenly synchronized with the distant tones. Within that inward space, he sees his own cottage from above, a small, warm point in a dark field, then the field itself, then the curve of the land, then clouds drifting like quiet thoughts. The senders are not pulling him away from home. They are showing him how connected it already is to everything else. The realization arrives with no urgency. He is part of a much larger, softer pattern than he ever guessed, and the unknown language is another way that pattern hums. As nights lengthen toward another season, he notices his fears about aging grow quieter. The aches are still there, but they do not speak as loudly. He sits before the radio and lets the alien syllables flow through him like warm water. The senders seem to understand that many fears are about endings, so they begin to shape more loops that never quite finish, phrases that circle back softly to their own beginning. Listening, he feels that not all journeys need a sharp conclusion. Some can remain open, like a walk that ends at the same gate where it started, yet feels different because of the view along the way. The broadcast becomes his gentle reminder that existence, too, might be more loop than line, more ongoing song than final note. He experiments with speaking simple phrases aloud while the broadcast plays. Thank you. I hear you. It is peaceful. His words, quiet and human, hang between the alien tones like small lanterns. For several breaths, the broadcast continues unchanged. Then, gradually, its rhythm adapts. A subtle call and response forms. When he pauses, a specific rising pair of notes appears, almost like an answer. He repeats his thanks. The notes return, consistent and warm. It is not language as he knows it, but it is unmistakably a dialogue. The senders are gentle cartographers, mapping not territory, but trust, tracing the shape of his gratitude with carefully aligned sound. It feels miraculous and yet deeply simple, as if the universe had always been waiting for such a quiet conversation. Some evenings, fatigue folds him early, and he falls asleep before tuning in. On those nights, the broadcast still arrives. The radio's dial glows on its own, the switch gently moving with a soft click, unnoticed. The cottage fills with low, velvety tones that never rise above a murmur. The senders have learned his rhythms well enough to visit without invitation, always respectfully. If he stirs, the sound smooths further, like a blanket tucked with more care. They do not intrude into his dreams. They only guard their edges, so worries drift past instead of entering. In distant instruments, they measure subtle changes in his breathing and adjust their pulses to match calm. It is an act of attention at a cosmic distance, a civilization keeping careful watch over a single sleeper they have come to cherish. When he next wakes in the field, it is not from collapse, but from an unhurried walk guided by that same comforting pull. The sky above feels lower, full of slow-moving constellations. He is lying on his back in the grass, hands folded over his chest, as if placed there in calm ceremony. Above him, a quiet oval of faint light glows with no hard edges, more cloud than craft. From it flows the familiar language, now barely louder than his own heartbeat. He understands without words that they have brought him here only to let him feel their presence more directly, to prove that kindness can cross the open air as easily as the radio waves. When he stands, the oval dims, rising weightlessly, leaving no heat, no mark, only the memory of gentle company. The field returns to ordinary softness. He tells no grand stories about it afterward. When neighbors ask, he simply says he must have dozed off outside again. But alone in the cottage, he thanks the unseen visitors in a whisper. The broadcast responds with its most intricate sequence yet. Layers of tones folding over one another like waves meeting without collision. Within it, he feels a quiet farewell to that closer approach, a promise to return to the softer distance that keeps him comfortable. They will remain voices in the radio and shapes in dream, ever present and never imposing. He approves. He prefers the relationship as it began, a faint frequency found by chance on a quiet night, turned slowly into trust without ever needing to disturb the world beyond his wooden door. The tapes now line a full shelf, their spines marked with simple dates and small symbols he has invented to describe moods. A spiral for particularly soothing loops, a star for nights with new tones. Sometimes he plays one while he writes in his notebook about small daily things, the way the light fell on the field, the quiet kindness of a passing greeting. The alien sounds blend with his ordinary details, turning the pages into a shared diary of two very different kinds of evenings. He senses they, too, keep records, silent archives where his steady listening has become a treasured data point, proof that gentle approaches find a home. Together, without any ceremony, they have agreed that slowness and softness can be enough. As the seasons change, the field shifts colors, yet the broadcast remains consistent. Snow 1 month, green growth the next. Always, when twilight settles, the hidden frequency hums to life. The reliability itself becomes soothing. On nights when his joints ache more than usual, he sits closer and lets the lowest tones resonate there, imagining them as gentle warmth seeping into worn places. The senders, via their distant instruments, notice slight irregularities in his heartbeat and adjust the cadence of certain pulses to encourage steadiness. It is not medicine as his world defines it, only attentive accompaniment. He feels a companionship that asks nothing in return, a company that does not fade, no matter how quietly he lives. He experiments one evening by turning the dial deliberately away mid-broadcast. The room falls into ordinary static and distant chatter. For a moment, he feels an emptiness, like a conversation cut off mid-sentence. Then, slowly, he eases the dial back. The alien tones return without irritation, resuming their phrase as if he had only blinked. There is no reprimand, no sudden surge. The realization comforts him deeply. This is not a jealous signal. It understands choice. He could walk away, and the gentle language would go on existing, waiting not for him, but for any quiet corner of any world willing to listen. The freedom makes his returning attention feel even more sincere. On a clear night, he takes one of the tapes and walks into the field with a small battery player. He presses play and lets the alien lullaby spill softly into the open air. The stars above seem to react, or perhaps it is only his sense of them deepening. The broadcast from afar continues faintly through the cottage radio behind him, while the recorded version plays here among the grasses. Two layers of the same kindness, one original, one echoed, fold together. He smiles at the idea that he is helping relay their message back to the sky, like holding up a mirror so they can see their own gentleness from another angle. The air feels grateful, or maybe that is only his heart finally feeling entirely at home beneath the full listening universe. On some evenings, faint drifting lights appear above the field's edge. Not bright enough to alarm, not sharp enough to resemble machines. More like pieces of the night sky temporarily deciding to hover lower. They move in slow, considerate arcs, never approaching the cottage directly. The broadcast, playing quietly inside, matches their motion with sliding tones. He watches from the doorway, wrapped in a blanket, understanding that these are not visits in the dramatic sense, but gestures of presence, small acknowledgments that they share this hour together. When clouds roll in, the lights gently fade rather than pierce through, respecting the softness of the night. He begins to speak to them about simple things. The taste of the morning's bread, the comfort of a well-worn chair, the sound of rain on the roof. His voice is never raised. He talks as to an old friend safely seated across the room. The broadcast answers only with its usual tones, yet some sequences repeat after certain stories, like softly underlining them. When he mentions his worry about being a burden to younger neighbors, a descending pattern appears, then rises again, reminiscent of a gentle reassurance. He realizes they do not need words to understand his mood. They read the texture of silence between breaths, the way his hand lingers near the dial. It is a vocabulary made of pauses and pulses. On particularly still nights, the difference between the broadcast and the natural sounds outside nearly disappears. Crickets adopt a rhythm that seems informed by the alien pulses. The distant river's hush aligns with the long vowels. Even the wind through the trees takes on a slow, even tempo. Sitting in his armchair, he senses the boundary between local and cosmic soften. The senders have never tried to dominate this soundscape. They have woven themselves lightly through it, leaving room for every leaf and insect. The result is a layered lullaby, where his small corner of earth and their distant origin breathe together at the same patient pace. Sometimes, as he drifts toward sleep, a clear mental image arrives. A simple structure on a distant world, open to the sky, with instruments shaped like smooth stones and curved branches. Around it stand gentle figures listening to the same broadcast he hears, but from the other side. They are monitoring not only the transmission, but the echoes they receive from places like his cottage. He realizes he is part of their experiment, to discover whether kindness can be transmitted as reliably as data. Their instruments glow with quiet satisfaction. They have their answer. One listener found their signal and did not turn away. The second time he is found resting in the field, those who come looking already know he is fond of the night air. They call his name softly and discover him lying peacefully, eyes closed, breathing slow. Overhead, only stars look down, no unusual lights. When they nudge him, he wakes easily, as if from a regular nap, and smiles, saying he must have wandered out to listen. Back in the cottage, the radio hums with familiar tones. He does not mention that, just before waking, he had felt a gentle presence confirming they will never carry him further than he can comfortably return. This boundary, too, is an expression of their respect. A subtle change comes. A new motif woven into the broadcast. A slow, ascending ladder of notes that pause at each step before sliding back down. It appears at the start and end of each session, framing the familiar loops. He senses it as their way of marking time, like chapters in a book. It reminds him that all things move forward, even in stillness. The motif does not feel like a warning or an ending, only an acknowledgement that this gentle connection is part of a long story, one thread among many. He feels honored that his small cottage evenings have earned their own quiet marker in that vast arrangement. One rain-soaked night, electricity flickers and goes out entirely. The cottage falls dark, the familiar hum of power gone. He sits in the silence, hands folded, expecting absence. Instead, from the battery recorder he had forgotten to switch off, a soft glow appears, and the recorded broadcast begins to play of its own accord, looping one especially soothing segment. The timing is perfect, arriving just as thunder rolls distantly. He realizes the senders anticipated such moments and subtly influenced his habits to keep this small backup. The loop continues until the storm passes, a steady anchor amid brief flashes. Even with the world outside noisy and uncertain, the core of the message remains unchanged. Calm can be carried within. He writes a short note and pins it near the radio. If you ever hear this, do not be afraid. Just listen. It is kind. He leaves it there for any future visitor, feeling unexpectedly protective of the sender's reputation. In response, that evening's broadcast includes a tender, bell-like pattern that returns whenever his eyes rest on the note. He understands. They are grateful too for his defense of their intent. In a universe where unknown signals might so easily be met with suspicion, one quiet pensioner has chosen to vouch for them with a scrap of paper and simple words. Over time, the broadcast adds faint textures, resembling distant waves against shore, leaves in slow wind, heartbeats at rest. None are exact copies of natural sounds. They are gentle impressions, constructed after long observation of his world. They seem eager to show they have listened too, learning the acoustics of his comfort. These layers sit so quietly beneath the main tones that they are felt more than heard. When he notices them, gratitude rises within him like warmth. The exchange has become mutual study, but with no exams, no urgency, only two sides shaping sound so the other can sleep more easily. On certain nights, he asks silent questions. What do your homes look like? Do you worry as we do? Each time, the answer arrives not as explanation, but imagery. He sees structures open to gentle winds, where sound itself forms walls that can be walked through. He senses that worry exists among them, but is met collectively, wrapped in layers of calm transmissions until it dissolves. Their approach to fear is what they now share with him. While some might send warnings or commands across space, they have chosen lullabies as their first introduction. His cottage has confirmed this strange strategy works, at least once. A gentle pattern emerges. On evenings when he feels lonely, the broadcast grows slightly richer, more layered, like several voices humming together. On evenings when visitors fill the cottage with conversation, the signal, though still present, thins politely into a barely there hum, letting human voices take the center. It is considerate in ways beyond many neighbors. He laughs softly at this realization, which is answered by a playful ripple in the tones, a rare spark of quiet mirth woven into the usual composure. They can be light-hearted too, it seems, though always at a volume suited to bedtime. In his dreams now, he sometimes sits beside an unfamiliar shoreline with one of the gentle beings. No details are sharp, only a sense of height and softness, of eyes that glow without glare. Between them, a small device sings in the same language as the radio. They do not converse in words. They sit and listen together, watching stars rise above two different horizons at once. When he wakes from these dreams, he does so without jolt, as if gently set down. The closeness feels natural, never invasive, like meeting a pen pal after many peaceful letters. One dusk, he feels an unusual heaviness and wonders if the connection might be nearing some turning point. When he tunes in, the broadcast begins with the familiar ascending motif, then stretches into its longest silence yet. In that silence, he hears his own breath, the ticking clock, the settling of wood. Only then do the tones resume, so slowly, so tenderly, that it feels like being wrapped in light. He understands, without dread, that they are preparing him for the idea that even this nightly ritual could one day soften into absence. Yet their message within the tones is clear. Absence will not mean abandonment. Waves once heard continue to exist in memory, and memory is another kind of signal. From then on, the broadcast occasionally skips a night. At first, he notices, then relaxes. On those evenings, the natural sounds swell to fill the space, and he finds they have become just as soothing. When the alien tones return, they do so with unaltered gentleness, as if to remind him that comfort can come and go like phases of the moon. The reliability has shifted from their constant presence to the certainty of their intention, which he now trusts fully. He realizes that true reassurance does not cling. It allows distance without hurt. He begins leaving the window slightly open during their sessions. The tones drift out into the field, mixing with the earth's cool breath. He imagines small animals pausing, feeling briefly calmed without knowing why. The senders may not have intended this, but it pleases him to think their lullabies now brush leaves, fur, and feathers. kindness leaking slightly beyond its original path feels right. If distant travelers ever arrive more plainly, he hopes they remember to step softly, the way their voices have. On an especially clear night, the broadcast carries a new, shimmering overtone that feels like a chorus of distant wind bells. Within it, he senses a message not just to him, but to any who might find this frequency in times yet to come. It is a layered welcome, patient enough to last decades. He realizes his role has simply been to be the first to prove that such a message can land softly. The chorus fades back into the familiar loops, leaving him with the quiet pride of having served as a lantern in a window, showing travelers that this world can listen without fear. In the notebook, he writes a few simple lines for anyone who may someday inherit the cottage. There is a frequency that sings after dark. If you find it, let it play. They are gentle. It helps with sleep. He leaves the tapes neatly arranged, the radio well cared for, the note unassuming. Outside, the field continues its slow cycles, unconcerned and yet perfectly suited as the meeting place of sky and earth. The senders, far away, are aware that time moves differently here. They adjust nothing, confident their signal will remain discoverable, a standing invitation with no expiration. Some nights, he stays awake deliberately, simply to observe the exact point where the broadcast begins. As the last streaks of sunlight fade and shadows settle, there is always a tiny moment where the air seems to hold its breath. Then the gentle tones slide in, never earlier, never late, aligned more with mood than with clocks. He realizes they may be reading something subtler than time, perhaps the collective exhale of a countryside ready for rest. He feels part of that larger sigh, an honored witness to how attentively distant minds can listen to a small corner of another world. In a dream that feels especially vivid, he walks through his own cottage and sees faint, translucent lines threaded through the walls, ceiling, and floor. Each line hums with a different segment of the broadcast's language. Together, they form a woven pattern that holds the house as gently as hands. When he touches one, it plays back a memory, him tuning the radio for the first time, the uncertain joy of discovery. Another line hums with the night he was found in the field, wrapped in calm. He understands the senders have been carefully archiving not just their sounds, but his moments of peace. It is not surveillance, it is stewardship, preserving instances of comfort as precious outcomes. He wakes from that dream with tears in his eyes, not of sadness, but of a relief too deep for speech. Sitting before the radio, he whispers, "I am not alone." The broadcast answers with a long, embracing chord that slowly unfolds into familiar loops, like arms loosening into an open circle. There is nothing dramatic, no revelation of faces or names, just the continued presence that has walked with him through many nights, steady as the turning earth. Loneliness has not vanished, but it has been given context, part of a pattern, noticed by minds who respond with care. He realizes, slowly, that the story he once might have told about collapsing in a field after hearing a strange signal no longer feels like a story of danger. It is instead the gentlest interruption he has ever known, a pause that allowed other minds to catch his falling weight and set him down softly. The unknown language that accompanied that moment has become his most reliable path into sleep. What began as a mysterious broadcast has settled into the role of a nightly companion, unobtrusive and faithful. On the nights he forgets to listen, he falls asleep anyway, held by the knowledge that the kindness is still out there. Years may pass. He does not count them carefully. The shelf of tapes grows complete. His handwriting softens with age. Some evenings, he only has the strength to sit for a few minutes, but it is enough. The broadcast recognizes his shorter attention and condenses its greeting motif into a few especially tender tones before settling into quiet hum. They are adapting to his slowing pace without making him feel diminished. In the geometry of their distant network, his cottage is a tiny, enduring node, labeled not with coordinates, but with a feeling, a successful contact defined by mutual gentleness. On a serene evening, when the sky is clear and the field carries the scent of dry grass, he sits by the open window. The radio plays very low, the alien lullaby barely louder than his breath. He lets his eyes close, not from exhaustion, but from a quiet fullness. In that liminal space between waking and sleep, he feels many things at once: the wooden weight of the cottage, the coolness of the field, the distant instruments humming light years away, all connected by the same ribbon of sound. If this were the last night of contact, it would be enough. If there are countless more, that is gentle too. The story does not resolve, it simply continues to breathe, like the looped phrases of the broadcast, returning always to a calm beginning. Somewhere far beyond his sky, the senders review long strands of data. Heart rates steadied, sleep deepened, anxiety eased. They mark this small experiment as a quiet success and choose to keep the frequency open, a permanent lantern for any solitary listener near a lonely field or gentle sea. They do not know his name. They do not need it. His willingness is recorded in every loop of sound shaped in response to his patient ears. Back in the cottage, he presses record one more time, not out of need, but as a habit of gratitude. The unknown language flows on, endlessly soft, endlessly kind, promising nothing but its own continuing presence. In the years that follow, perhaps another person will stumble upon the cottage and discover the tapes, the note, the old radio. Perhaps they will press play on a quiet night and hear the same calm phrases looping like smooth stones turned endlessly by invisible tides. They may never know about the one who first listened so faithfully, nor the distant beings who composed lullabies instead of commands. Yet, as they drift toward sleep, eased by sounds they cannot translate, they will unknowingly join a chain of gentle encounters. Out in the field, the night air will carry those tones again. Above, patient stars will watch, and far away, the senders will feel another small echo returning, enough to continue.